Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our third installment of Leanda's English Experience live stream. And thank you for joining me for take two of chapter six. If any of you are joining me again, sorry about the previous live stream a little while ago. It seems I had my microphone off. How silly of me. So, thank you for giving me another chance and for understanding. Today, we are continuing our story of The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. If you've missed the first two live streams where we do chapter 1 to 5, you can access them using this link up here. And there's also a link to the um, playlist in the channel description. We are using the public domain work from Project Gutenberg. You can find a link for that in the description as well. And if you are joining me for this journey, please feel free to pop any questions in the chat. And I look forward to hearing from you. So let's start with chapter 6, Mr. Toad. Now, before we start, I want to say I'm quite excited about this part because in our previous episode, when we were reading about chapter 4, Mr. Badger, and their experience of being stuck in Mr. Badger's house during the winter, Mr. Badger said that he was going to wait until the spring starts and then put Mr. Toad in his place. And I'm quite excited to see what happens in this next part, whether they're actually going to be able to curb his enthusiasm for motor cars and the menace that he's become to society. So let's have a look. Here we go. Mr. Toad. It was a bright morning in the early part of summer. The river had resumed its wonted banks and accustomed pace, and hot sun seemed to be pulling everything green and bushy and spiky up out of the earth towards him, as if by strings. The mole and the water rat had been up since dawn, very busy on matters connected with boats and the opening of the boating season, painting and varnishing, mending paddles, repairing cushions, hunting for missing boat hooks, and so on, and were finishing breakfast in their little parlour and eagerly discussing their plans for the day, when a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Bother," said Rat, all over his egg. "So see who it is, Mole, like a good chap, since you've finished." The Mole went to attend the summons, and the Rat heard him ut- uh, the Mole went to attend the summons, and the Rat heard him utter a cry of surprise. Then he flung the parlour door open and announced with much importance, "Mr. Badger." This was a wonderful thing indeed that the Badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed on anybody. He generally had to be caught if you wanted him badly, as he slipped quietly along the hedgerows of an early morning or late evening, or else hunted up in his house in the middle of the wood, which was a serious undertaking. The Badger strode heavily into the room and stood looking at the two animals with an expression full of seriousness. The Rat let his egg spoon fall on the table and sat open-mouthed. "The hour has come," said the Badger at last, with great solemnity. "What hour?" asked the Rat uneasily, glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece. "Whose hour, I should rather say," replied the Badger. "Why, Toad's hour, the hour of Toad. I said I would take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over, and I'm going to take him in hand today." Okay, so my guess was right. Very, very exciting. And I also love this expression, to take him in hand. When you take someone in hand, it means that you um, kind of discipline somebody and that you're taking control of a situation that you think has kind of gotten a little bit out of control. And in this case, in the book, he said, "I said I would take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over. I'm going to take him in hand today." So Toad has been out of hand and behaving badly with his obsession with motor cars, being a menace to the other animals. And now the Badger, who is kind of like the leader, is going to take control of the situation. This is definitely a expression that you can still use today. For example, my team My team struggled to get the presentation perfect, so I decided to take the situation in hand. Or my garage has gotten completely messy and I had to take the situation in hand. And of course, as some of you might have realized, the opposite expression of this is being out of hand. When something or someone is out of hand, it's completely out of control. So, for example, we got completely out of hand at the festival and my legs are still sore. Or the mess in the kitchen is completely out of hand. Somebody better clean it right now, or something like that. All right. Toad's hour, of course, cried the mole delightedly. Hooray! I remember now. We'll teach him to be a sensible toad. This very morning, continued the badger, taking an armchair, as I learnt last night from a trustworthy source, another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall on approval or return. At this very moment, perhaps, Toad is busy arraying himself in those singularly hideous habiliments so dear to him, which transform him from a comparatively good-looking toad into an object which throws any decent-minded animal that comes across it into a violent fit. Isn't that hilarious? I absolutely love that. In this case, Badger is describing the horrible outfit that Toad is putting on when he drives the car. And I'm guessing it's going to be one of those very old school driving outfits, with goggles and a special pair of pants and special shoes and those little gloves and a driving cap. And it's just so ridiculous and outside of his nature that any normal person looking at it would go into a fit seeing it, which I'm guessing means to be completely overwhelmed and bowled over by it. And I think that that's really hilarious because I think we've all had moments like that in real life, for sure. I mean, everybody should be allowed to let their freak flag fly and go crazy with whatever they want to wear. But sometimes when people are pushing something which they're clearly not suitable for, it can be quite a shock to other people's systems around them, perhaps because they don't understand it. And in this case, that is exactly what is happening. We must be up and doing ere it's too late. You two animals will accompany me to Toad Hall, and the work of rescue shall be accomplished. Right you are, cried Rat, starting up. We'll rescue the poor unhappy animal. We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted toad that ever was before we're done with him. They set off up the road on their mission of mercy, Badger leading the way. Animals, when in company, walk in a proper and sensible manner in single file, instead of sprawling across the road and being of no use or support to each other in case of a sudden trouble or danger. They reached the carriage drive of Toad Hall to find, as Badger had anticipated, a shiny new motor car of great size, painted a bright red, Toad's favorite color, standing in front of the house. As they neared the door, it was flung open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap, gaiter, and enormous overcoat, came swaggering down the steps, drawing on his gauntleted gloves. All right, so definitely my estimation was correct. Here comes Toad, dressed in goggles, a cap, gaiters, which are special pants, I think, and an enormous overcoat. And I love the contrast that they say he came swaggering down the steps, because when you swagger, you're kind of walking with an attitude. You're walking with like you're kind of cool, and obviously Toad thinks he's very cool, and he is completely sort of in love with his own self-image in this case. And it's such a fantastic contrast to the fit that this outfit is creating in the minds of his friends who are looking at him being dressed all ridiculous like that. Hello, come on, you fellows, he cried cheerfully on catching sight of them. You're just in time to come with me for a jolly, to come for a jolly, for a jolly. His hearty accents faltered and fell away as he noticed the stern, unbending look on the countenances of his silent friends, and his invitation remained unfinished. The badger strode up the steps. "Take him inside," he said sternly to his companions, and then, as Toad was hustled through the door, struggling and protesting, he turned to the chauffeur in charge of the new motor car. "I'm afraid you won't be wanted today," he said. "Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He will not require the car. Please understand that this is final. You needn't wait." Then he followed the others inside and shut the door. "Now then," he said to Toad, when the four of them stood together in the hall. "First off, take those ridiculous things off." "Shan't," replied the Toad with great spirit. "What's the meaning of this gross outrage? I demand instant explanation." "Take them off him then, you two," ordered the Badger briefly. They had to lay Toad out on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could get to work properly. Then the Rat sat on him, and the Mole got the motor clothes off him bit by bit, and they stood him up on his legs again. A good deal of his blustering spirit seemed to have evaporated with the removal of his fine panoply. Now that he was merely Toad, and no longer the terror of the highway, he giggled feebly and looked from one to the other appealingly, seeming quite to understand the situation. "You knew it must come to this sooner or later, Toad," Badger explained severely. "You've disregarded all the warnings we've given you. You've gone on squandering the money your father left you, and you're getting us animals a bad name in the district by your furious driving and your smashes and your rows with the police." Look at that beautiful usage of the word squander. You've gone and squandered the money your father left you. For those who missed the first stream, I'm going to pin a comment up here. You can see I did a little curious English definition of the word squandered, and I think that that's really a lovely use of it in that sentence. Independence is all very well, but we animals never follow our friends to make fools of us. Let me start that again. Independence is all very well, but we animals never allow our friends to make fools of themselves beyond a certain limit, and that limit you have reached. Now you're a good now you're a good fellow in many respects, and I don't want to be too hard on you. I'll make one more effort to bring you to reason. You will come with me into the smoking room, and there you will hear some facts about yourself, and we'll see whether you come out of that room the same Toad you went in. Took Toad firmly by the arm, led him into the smoking room, and closed the door behind them. "That's no good," said Rat contemptuously. "Talking to Toad will never cure him. He'd say anything." This word contemptuously comes from the word contempt. And when you have contempt for something, you have a very severe dislike, almost a hate for it. And in this case, the rat says, "That's no good," contemptuously, meaning that he absolutely despises this idea of talking to Toad because he knows Toad so well and he knows that it's absolutely not going to work. So that's a great word to highlight his distaste of the situation in this case. And definitely, you could use this word in daily life as well. I would say um, it has quite a negative connotation sometimes, but maybe something like the woman looked at me contemptuously when I dropped my bag and broke a bottle that spilt all over the floor, and I wondered what her problem was. In that situation, maybe you were carrying a shopping bag and something in a glass bottle in your bag broke when you dropped it, which is no fault of your own. Obviously, it was an accident. And then this woman kind of looked at you with this look of severe dislike and um, kind of judged the unacceptability of what you had done as if you were kind of throwing things around on purpose. But it's not your fault. Um, or maybe something like my daughter screamed at me contemptuously because I wouldn't let her go out for the evening. In that situation, maybe a teenager is being very emotional about the fact that there have been some limits put on them and they hate the situation, so they're being very aggressive and um, sort of hateful about the situation. They made themselves comfortable in armchairs and waited patiently. Through the closed door they could just hear the long, continuous drone of the badger's voice, rising and falling in waves of oratory, and presently they noticed that the sermon began to be punctuated at intervals by long drawn sobs, evidently proceeding from the bosom of Toad, who was a soft-hearted and affectionate fellow, very easily converted, for the time being, to any point of view. After some three-quarters of an hour the door opened and the badger reappeared, solemnly leading by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad. His skin hung baggily about him, his legs wobbled, and his cheeks were furrowed by the tears so plentifully called forth by Badger's moving discourse. "Sit down there, Toad," said the badger kindly, pointing to a chair. "My friends," he went on, "I'm pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways. He is truly sorry for his misguided conduct in the past. He has, excuse me, and he has undertaken to give up motor cars entirely and forever. I, I have made his solemn promise to that effect, or I have his solemn promise to that effect." "That's very good news," said the mole gravely. "Very good news indeed," observed the rat dubiously. "If only, if only, here's another great word, dubiously. When something is dubious or something happens dubiously, it means it's very doubtful. At this point in time, again, Rat, who is very astute, knows his friend extremely well, and he seriously doubts whether Toad actually has it in him to be converted to anything. So by saying that it's very good news in a dubious way, it means it's kind of like, oh, yeah, that's great, with a big eye roll, because he knows the chances of it actually sticking are less than nothing. And definitely, this is also something that you could use in daily life. For example, with the adjective dubious, I was very dubious about the current diet fad and decided not to try it because I was worried about my health. Um, I thought of that example because when I was a model in the early 2000s, there was a fad diet that went around where models ate only pineapple and tuna for a week or two. And I really had serious doubts about how healthy that could be for you. So decided not to get onto that trend bus. Um, or maybe something like she entered the swimming pool dubiously. Maybe somebody doesn't really like swimming, or they're worried that the water is very cold, so they're kind of moving very hesitantly into the swimming pool, not really feeling very um, convinced to do it. He was looking very hard at Toad as he said this, and could not help thinking he perceived something vaguely resembling a twinkling in that animal's still sorrowful eye. "There's only one thing more to be done," continued the gratified badger. "Toad, I want you to solemnly repeat before your friends here what you fully admitted to me in the smoking room just now. First, you are sorry for what you've done, and you see the folly of it all." There was a long pause. Toad looked desperately this way and that while the other animals waited in grave silence, and at last he spoke. "No," he said, a little sullenly but stoutly, "I'm not sorry, and it wasn't folly at all. It was simply glorious." "What?" cried the badger, greatly scandalized. "You backsliding animal! Didn't you tell me just now in there—" "Oh, yes, 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 in there," said the toad impatiently. "I'd have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear badger, and so moving and so convincing, and put all your points so frightfully well. You can do what you like with me in there, and you know it. But I've been searching my mind since, and going over things in it, and I find that I'm not a bit sorry or repentant, really. So it's no earthly good saying that I am. Now is it?" Then you don't promise, said the badger, never to touch a motor car again. Certainly not, replied the toad emphatically. On the contrary, I faithfully promise that the very first motor car I see, poop poop, off I go in it. Told you so, didn't I? Observed the rat to the mole. Very well, then, said the badger firmly, rising to his feet. Since you won't yield to persuasion, we'll try what force can do. I feared it would come to this all along. You've often asked us three to come and stay with you, Toad, in this handsome house of yours. Well, now we're going to. When we've converted you to a proper point of view, we may quit, but not before. Taking him upstairs, you two, and lock him up in his bedroom, while we arrange matters between ourselves. It's for your own good, Toady, you know, said Rat kindly, as Toad, kicking and struggling, was hauled up the stairs by his two faithful friends. Think what fun we shall have together, just as we used to, when you've got over this painful attack of yours. We'll take great care of everything for you till you're well, Toad, said the mole, and we'll see your money isn't wasted as it has been. No more of those regrettable incidents with the police, Toad, said the rat, as they thrust him into his bedroom, and no more weeks in hospitals being ordered by female nurses, Toad, added the mole, turning the key on him. They descended the stair, Toad shouting abuse at them through the keyhole, and the three friends then met in conference on the situation. It's going to be a tedious business, said the badger, sighing. I've never seen Toad so determined. However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded. We shall have to take it in turns to be with him till the poison has worked itself out of his system. They arranged watches accordingly. Each animal took it in turns to sleep in Toad's room at night, and they divided the day up between them. At first, Toad was undoubtedly very trying to his careful guardians. When his violent paroxysms pos- possessed him, he would arrange bedroom chairs in a rude resemblance of a motor car, and would crouch on the foremost of them, bent forward and staring fixedly ahead, making uncouth and ghastly noises, till the climax was reached, when turning a complete somersault, he would lie prostrate amid the ruins of the chair, apparently completely satisfied for the moment. As time passed, however, these painful seizures grew gradually less frequent, and his friends strove to divert his mind into fresh channels. But his interest in other matters did not seem to revive, and he grew apparently languid and depressed. One fine morning, the rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve Badger, whom he found fidgeting to be off and stretch his legs in a long ramble around his wood and down his earthsome burrows. Toad's still in bed, he told Rat outside the door. Can't get much out of him except, oh, leave him alone, and he wants nothing, and perhaps he'd be better presently. It may pass off in time. Don't be unduly anxious, and so on. Now you look out, Rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive and playing at being the hero of a Sunday school prize, then he's at his artfulest. There's sure to be something up. I know him. Well, now, I must be off. How are you today, old chap? Inquired the rat cheerfully as he approached Toad's bedside. He had to wait some minutes for an answer. At last a feeble voice replied, Thank you so much, Ratty dear. So good of you to inquire. But first, tell me how you are yourself, and the excellent Mole. Oh, we're all right, replied the rat. Mole, he added incautiously, is going out for a run around with Badger. They'll be out till luncheon time, so you and I will spend a pleasant morning together, and I'll do my best to amuse you. Now jump in, there's a good fellow, and don't lie moping there on a fine morning like this. I wonder how smart it was of Rat to tell the Toad that the other two are gone. Dear kind Rat, murmured Toad, how little you realize my condition, and how very far I am from jumping up now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I hate being a burden to my friends, and I do not expect to be much longer. Indeed, I almost hope not. Well, I hope not too, said the rat heartily. You've been a fine bother to us all this time, and I'm glad to hear it's going to stop. And in weather like this, and the boating season just beginning, it's bad of you, Toad. It isn't the trouble we mind, but you're making us miss such an awful lot." "I'm afraid it is the trouble you mind, though," replied Toad languidly. "I can quite understand it. It's natural enough. You're tired of bothering about me. I mustn't ask you to do anything further. I'm a nuisance, I know." "You are indeed," said the rat, "but I tell you, I'd take any trouble on earth for you, if only you'd be a sensible animal." "If I thought that, Ratty," murmured Toad, more feebly than ever, "then I would beg you, for the last time probably, to step round to the village as quickly as possible. Even now it may be too late, and fetch the doctor. But don't you bother. It's only a trouble, and perhaps we may as well let things take their course." "Why, what do you want a doctor for?" inquired the rat, coming closer and examining him. He certainly lay very flat and still, and his voice was weaker, and his manner much changed. "Surely you have noticed of late," murmured Toad. "But no, why should you? Noticing things is only a trouble. To-morrow, indeed, you may be saying to yourself, 'Oh, if only I had noticed sooner, if only I had done something.' But no, it's a trouble. Never mind. Forget I asked." "Now look here, old man," said the rat, beginning to get rather alarmed. "Of course I'll fetch a doctor for you, if you really think you want him. But you can hardly be bad enough for that yet. Let's talk about something else." "I fear, dear friend, that talk can do little in a case like this, or doctors either, for that matter. Still, one must grasp at the slightest straw. And, by the way, while you're about it, I hate to give you additional trouble, but I happen to remember that you will pass the door. Would you mind at the same time asking a lawyer to step up? It would be a convenience to me, and there are moments, perhaps I should say there is a moment, when one must face disagreeable moments. Perhaps I should say there ah, Perhaps I should say there is a moment when one must face disagreeable tasks, or whatever cost to exhausted nature." "A lawyer? Oh, he must be really bad," the affrighted rat said to himself as he hurried from the room, not forgetting, however, to lock the door carefully behind him. Let's just stop here for a second. I think this is really awesome, this whole section here. Isn't it incredible how Toad is manipulating Rat? He's basically emotionally blackmailing him, pretending to be sick and half dead, and wanting to call a doctor and a lawyer to get his affairs in order because he's in such a terrible state. But this slippery little eel knows that Badger and Mole are gone. And now, because Rat is isolated and on his own, he's emotionally blackmailing him to get him out of the way, which I'm sure is going to lead to horrendous consequences. And even though I don't at all agree with that kind of behavior, I do think it's quite impressive how this toad thinks on his feet, and how sort of slippery and conniving he's being. I'm sure we've all known people like that at some point in our lives. Maybe we've been caught by this kind of emotional blackmail. I know I certainly have. And yeah, it's never it's never fun. But the way that they're describing it here, I think, is quite hilarious. Outside, he stopped to consider. The other two were far away, and he had no one to consult. "It's best to be on the safe side," he said on reflection. "I've known Toad fancy himself frightfully bad before, without the slightest reason, but I've never heard him ask for a lawyer. If there's nothing really the matter, the doctor will tell him he's an old ass, and cheer him up, and that will be something gained. I'd better humour him and go. It won't take very long." So he ran off to the village on his errand of mercy. Toad, who had hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he heard the key turn in the lock, watched him eagerly from the window till he disappeared down the carriage drive. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed as quickly as possible in his smartest suit he could lay his hands on at that moment, filled his pockets with cash he took from a small drawer in the dressing table, and next, knotting sheets from his bed together and tying one end of the impoverished rope around the central mullion of the handsome Tudor window which formed such a feature of his bedroom, he scrambled out, slid lightly to the ground, and taking the opposite direction to Rat, marched off light-heartedly, whistling a merry tune. It's like a little jail escape or something from an old cartoon. It was a gloomy luncheon for Rat when Badger and Mole at length returned, and he had to face them at table with his pitiful and unconvincing story. The Badger's caustic, not to say brutal remarks may be imagined, and therefore passed over. But it was painful to Rat that even Mole, though he took his friend's side as far as was possible, could not help saying, "You've been a bit of a duffer this time, Ratty. Toad too, of all animals." "He did it awfully well," said the crestfallen Rat. "He did you awfully well," rejoined the Badger hotly. "However, talking won't mend matters. He's got clear away for the time, that's certain, and the worst of it is, he'll be so conceited with what he'll think is his cleverness, that he may commit any folly. One comfort is, we're free now, and needn't waste any more of our precious time doing sentry go. We'd better continue to sleep at Toad Hall for a while longer. Toad may be brought back at any moment on a stretcher or between two policemen." So spoke the Badger, not knowing what the future held in store, or how much water, or of how turbid a character was to run under the bridges before Toad should sit at ease again in his ancestral hall. So basically, Badger has no idea what sort of mess will have to happen before they can actually bring this toad to heel and back home. Meanwhile, Toad, gay and irresponsible, was walking briskly along the high road some miles from home. At first he had taken bypaths and crossed many fields, and changed his course several times in case of pursuit, but now, feeling by this time safe from recapture, and the sun smiling brightly on him, and all nature joining in on the chorus of approval to the song of self-praise that his own heart was singing to him, he almost danced along the road in his satisfaction and conceit. This is very cool, this word conceit. Badger earlier said, let me just find it quickly. And the worst of it is, he'll be so conceited with what he'll think is his cleverness that he may commit any folly. And now he almost danced along the road in his satisfaction and conceit. When you're conceited, or when you have conceit, it means that you've got a higher opinion of yourself, that you think you're more than others, or better than others, or smarter than others, or something like that. And they obviously know his character extremely well. He's very manipulative, and he always thinks he's smarter than everybody else. And it's horrible that they're all kind of worried, trying to help him. And here he is, kind of prancing down the road without a care of the world, thinking that he's better than everybody. In the next little section, we can actually see some evidence of that. He says, "Smart piece of work that," he remarked to himself, chuckling. "Brain against brute force, and brain came out on top, as it's bound to do. Poor old Ratty! My, won't he catch it when the Badger gets back? A worthy fellow, Ratty, with many good qualities, but very little intelligence and absolutely no education. I must take him in hand some day, and see if I can make something of him." Filled full of conceited thoughts such as these, he strode along, his head in the air. So he basically thinks he's smarter than Rat because he managed to trick him, and that the fact that Rat was tricked shows that he's got no intelligence and education to speak of, which is absolutely ridiculous. Um, Considering the fact that I think Rat's actually much smarter than Toad, he's just a lot more honest and maybe also a little bit more emotionally intelligent, and less selfish, certainly. So yeah, but as for the word conceit or conceited, you definitely can use that in daily life. It has quite a negative connotation to it, but in some situations, it is suitable. For example, he became very conceited after his business's success, and stopped mingling with his old friends or something like that, meaning that he had a higher opinion of himself after his business became successful and started ignoring his friends. Or try not to get conceited when you win the gold medal. Oh, actually, no, that's a bad example. But you understand what I mean, right? Um, till he reached the little town where the sign of the Red Lion, swinging across the road halfway down the main street, reminded him that he had not breakfasted that day and that he was exceedingly hungry after his long walk. He marched into the inn, ordered the best luncheon that could be provided at so short a notice, and sat down to eat in the coffee room. He was about halfway through his meal when an only too familiar sound approaching down the street made him start and fall trembling all over. The poop poop drew nearer. Car could be heard turn into the inn yard and come to a stop, and Toad had to hold on to the leg of the table to conceal his overmastering emotion. Presently, the party entered the coffee room, hungry, talkative, and gay, voluble on their experiences of the morning and the merits of the chariot that had brought them along so well. Toad listened eagerly, all ears, for a time. At last he could stand it no longer. He slipped out of the room quietly, paid his bill at the bar, and as soon as he got sauntered round quietly to the inn yard. There cannot be any harm to himself, my only looking at it. The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended, the stable helps and other hangers-on being all at their dinner. Toad walked slowly around it, inspecting, criticizing, musing deeply. I wonder, he said to himself presently, I wonder if this sort of car starts easily. Oh, here comes trouble. Next moment, hardly knowing how it came about, he found he had hold of the handle and was turning it. As the familiar sound broke forth, the old passion seized on Toad and completely mastered him, body and soul. As if in a dream, he found himself somehow seated in the driver's seat. As if in a dream, he pulled the lever and swung the car round the yard and out the archway. And, as if in a dream, all sense of right and wrong, all fear of obvious consequences seemed temporarily suspended. He increased his pace as the car devoured the street and leapt forth on the high road through the open country. He was only conscious that he was Toad once more, Toad at his best and highest, Toad the terror, the traffic queller, lord of the long trail, his best and highest, Toad before. Mm, let me start that sentence again. He increased his pace, and as the car devoured the street and leapt forth on the high road through the open country, he was only conscious that he was Toad once more, Toad at his best and highest, Toad the terror, Toad the traffic queller, the lord of the long trail, before whom all must give way or be smitten into nothingness and everlasting night. He chanted as he flew, and the car responded with a sonorous drone. The miles were eaten up under him as he sped he knew not whither, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour, reckless of what might come to him. Oh my word. Okay, so previously we were dealing with a character here that was actually just a little bit obsessive with his passions and maybe sometimes a little bit irresponsible, as well. And definitely, we know that he's a manipulating character and probably quite selfish and boastful. But now he's guilty of grand theft auto. I mean, it's as if he's in a dream, sure. They say that three times, as if in a dream. So obviously, they're emphasizing the fact that he is very unaware of what he's doing, perhaps because of his own hubris, like his own ego. He doesn't really notice fully what um, what he's doing. But regardless of the fact, he's now actually committed a top level crime in his madness, which I think is very scary. To my mind, observed the chairman of the bench of magistrates cheerfully, the only difficulty that presents itself in this otherwise very clear case is how we can possibly make it sufficiently hot for the incorrigible rogue and hardened ruffian we see cowering in the dock before us. Let me see. He has been found guilty on the clearest evidence, first of stealing a valuable motor car, secondly of driving to the public danger, and thirdly of gross impertinence to the rural police. Mr. Clerk, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose for each of these offences, without, of course, giving the prisoner the benefit of any doubt, because there isn't any? Clerk scratched his nose with his pen. Some people would consider, he observed, that stealing the motor car was the worst offence, and so it is. But cheeking the police undoubtedly carries the severest penalty, and so it ought. Suppose you were to say 12 months for theft, which is mild, and 3 years for the furious driving, which is lenient, and 15 years for the cheek, which was pretty bad sort of cheek, judging by what we've heard from the witness box, even if you only believe 1/10 of what you've heard, and I never really believe more myself, those figures, if added up correctly, tot up to 19 years. First rate, said the chairman. So you had better make it around 20 years to be on the safe side, concluded the clerk. An excellent suggestion, said the chairman approvingly. Prisoner, pull yourself together and try and stand up straight. It's going to be 20 years for you this time, and mind, if you appear before us again upon any charge whatever, we shall have to deal with it very seriously. Then the brutal minions of the law fell upon the hapless Toad, loading him with chains and dragging him from the courthouse, shrieking, praying, protesting, across the marketplace, where the playful populace, always as severe upon detected crime as they are sympathetic and helpful when one is merely wanted, assailed him with jeers, carrots, and popular catchwords, past hooting children, their, incon- their innocent faces lit up ever derive pleasure they ever derive from the sight of a gentleman in difficulties, across the hollow sounding drawbridge, below the spiky portcullis, under the frowning archway of the grim old castle, whose ancient towers soared high overhead, past guardrooms full of grinning soldiery off duty, past sentries who coughed in a horrid sarcastic way, because that is as much as a sentry on his post dare do to show his contempt and abhorrence of crime, upon time-worn windy stairs, past men-at-arms in casket and corslets of steel, or casquettes and corslets of steel, darting threatening looks through their vizards, across the courtyard where mastiffs strained at their leash and pawed at the air to get at him, past ancient warders, their halberds leant against the wall, dozing over a pasty and a flagon of brown ale, and on, past the rack chamber and the thumbscrew room, past the turning that led to the private scaffold, till they reached the door of the grimmest dungeon that lay in the heart of the innermost keep, and there at last they paused, where an ancient jailer sat fingering a bunch of mighty keys. Odds bodkins, said the sergeant of police, taking off his helmet and wiping his forehead. Rouse thee, old loon, and take over from us this vile Toad, a criminal of deepest guilt and matchless artfulness and resource. Watch and ward him with all thy skill, and mark thee well, greybeard. Should aught untowards befall, thy old head shall answer for this, and a murrain on both of them. The jailer nodded grimly, laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable Toad. The rusty key creaked in the lock, the great door clanged behind him. and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all the length and breadth of merry England. All right, I'm going to stop here for today. Thank you so, so much for joining me. What do you all think about Toad? Did he get what he deserved in this case after all the hell that he raised? Um, was it fair for him to get 20 years in prison for this horrible deed that he had committed? And do you think he'll stay there and actually become truly penitent for what he's done? Or is he going to try and make a break for it? Based on what we know on his character, I'm going to say I probably think he's going to try and make a break for it somewhere along the way at the first opportunity he gets. But let me know your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear from you guys. Pop it in the chat. And if you'd like to see what happens in the next episode, then remember to check this link. See you next time.